Hi, I'm Rob Penzak. Welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. Today we're going to be joined by D. William Johnson, the founder of ex-mormon.com. First we're going to open with a little bit of news. As everybody's seen this past week, there was a lot of coverage. We're on the 12th anniversary of 9/11. Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz celebrated this by announcing that he felt 100 more Jesse Helms were needed in the Senate so we could kind of recapture those good old days. This announcement was made to the Koch brother-funded Heritage Foundation. The Koch brothers being the billionaire children of Fred Koch, who was one of the co-founders of the John Birch Society. Needless to say, in John Roberts' post-racial America, it's a little bit odd to have this kind of announcement by a senator kind of celebrating one of the biggest racists that we ever had running the Senate. So that was not a great way to celebrate 9/11, I thought. One other thing, if we can show the first picture up there, we've got an image of Pastor Terry Jones. He celebrated 9/11 by wanting to burn roughly 3,000 Korans, one for each member that died in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And you can take that off. One has to wonder if all the people in Iraq, there were between 100,000 up to maybe 500,000 or 600,000 civilians that were killed by our own theocratic government. And one has to wonder if they're over there saying today or this week, this month, we're going to burn 500,000 Bibles, one in honor of each of the Iraqi civilians that was murdered by America's theocracy. So, religion, it's important to think about religion on the anniversary of 9/11. That really stimulated a lot of people into become more active in the atheist movement and understand some of the harm that comes from religion. What else do we have to go over here? Another thing that happened culminating in September 11th, this was back in 1857, was that there was I'll show you this book about it, the massacre at Mount Meadows. And this was, up till that point, the biggest religion-related terrorist attack on American soil. And in that, roughly 120 or 140 emigrants that were heading out to California got waylaid by a group of Mormons. Now, the Mormons kind of felt that they were about to be under attack by the US Army, which wasn't kind of happy with their blossoming theocracy. What happened, though, is that these Mormons, kind of attacked out of the blue. A bunch of people, of the emigrants, were killed in that first round, and then a several-day siege occurred. Toward the end of that, as the people were getting more and more desperate, and David Fitzgerald talks about this at great length in his book about the Mormons, A Heretic's Guide to Western Religions. But those people there, those 120 emigrants or so, were getting desperate. They were starving, they were very thirsty, and eventually a white flag came offering them a truce that they would be able to leave the area safely under certain guidelines. And there was a lot of reluctance to do this because they were worried that it was a trick. Turned out that it was a trick, and the Mormons murdered and hacked up, and there's a lot of very barbaric things. They butchered a lot of women and children who were just clinging to their legs, pleading for their lives. In response to this afterward, the Church of the Latter-day Saints basically had a massive cover-up. And there's been several books on the matter. It's back in the news periodically. But it's one of the things to remember as we look back on 9/11, again, the harm of religion and some of the things that have happened in our own country owing to religion. And David Fitzgerald says that the only real question remaining was whether the Mormon leader at the time, Brigham Young, had directly ordered these murders. So neither myself or the guest are really experts on this. Maybe at some point we'll get David Fitzgerald, see what kind of information he can give us, because I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. Now if I can introduce our guest, if we can bring him on. This is Will. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, thanks for having me on the show.
Sure. Now, I took a look at a few of the videos on your site, and I really found them extremely moving. I think we tend to look at religion and see the harm that it causes in sometimes a very cerebral manner. I haven't been religious all my life. I've been recognized myself, as soon as I thought about it, as an atheist. So I don't have any of the same experiences. But I think that your channel really captures, these are dedicated believers that have so much invested in religion, and they don't give an egghead response to arguments against religion. They give how it really hurt them. And we'll get to a bunch of those videos later. And thank you very much for putting those together.
Absolutely.
Okay, if we can start with this first video is one that your brother put together. I think gives us a lot of interesting points to talk about. So if we can roll that first video there.
Tragically, at one point in my mission, news came that my dad had died. And I didn't go home. I didn't think twice. I didn't even consider the idea of going home. I felt Dad would want me to stay here where I am and serve the Lord. Just before my first boy was born, my brother, my younger brother, died. He committed suicide. And this was, I think, one of the turning points in my life. And right away, a friend of mine, a friend of the family's, came to me and the family and said, I have this patriarchal blessing that tells me that I have this gift, that I'll be able to raise people from the dead. This is a time in your life when you're going to see a miracle. My older brother left the church, and he was somebody I really looked up to. He's a very intelligent person. He's a really good person. He was always like, to me, he seemed like Nephi. He always did the right thing. He always made the right decisions. And he left the church. And I thought, why? Why would he leave the church? This thing is true. He served a 2-year mission and he left. I felt so bad. And so I just told him straight out, I don't know everything. Maybe you are right and maybe I am wrong, or maybe I am right and you are wrong. But it can't be both. It can't be both ways. My whole life, truth has always led me back into the church. It has never led me out. It always came back to the church was true. And so I knew that it would lead me back into the church. I wasn't worried. I started to get desperate because I wanted this church to be true. I had a temple marriage on the line. I had kids. I have my eternal family. I have my eternal salvation is on the line. This is not something I take lightly. This is a very serious concern. I want this church to be true. The whole reason I was going into all this is because my brother was having these questions. I wanted to help him. So here I was, basically at the edge of a cliff. It felt like I was just teetering over the edge of this cliff. And I was taught my whole life, if you fall away, you'll turn evil. You'll be in the devil's hands. All of these fears started coming over me, and I started feeling like, well, what do I do? If the church isn't false, all that stuff doesn't matter, but I still feel like I'm doing the wrong thing. It's like you're taught against this your whole life. You're taught that this moment is the moment where you're supposed to say, no, I've been tricked by the devil. Come back into the arms of Jesus. But I couldn't. In general, are telling us, better smarten up because there's this boogeyman to get you. And then you start realizing the best, it's just, okay, it's the happiest thing. There's no Satan. It's just like, boom, all of a sudden, the boogeyman's gone. When people say, well, what do you have as a purpose? Once you've left Mormonism, what do you have? If you're going to die, that's it. So why do you live? Why do you even care? And I say, because I care more now. I care a lot more now. Because this life matters more now than it ever did. And my children's lives and their children's lives and this planet. We are here together, and this life is important to me.
Now, I cut that original video down from 23 minutes to about 3, so a lot of the artistic stuff is missing. One of the things I really didn't want to cut was your brother's reaction there at the end when he realizes there's no Satan, there's no bogeyman, I'm going to be all right. And he had such joy about that. Is that, can you comment on that? Is that a usual reaction? I've never believed in Satan, but he was so moved by that.
Yeah, well, I think different religions use the fear tactics or the phobias of Satan in different ways. Mormonism has a lot of fears surrounding information, surrounding leaving the church. I think that's normal in a lot of ways in religions, but I think it's rather extreme in Mormonism. So finding out that Satan isn't out there to get you, really, it's like a freedom to be able to, just look at information. Like if you're shielding yourself from criticisms of something that's foundational to your life, you're viewing life from a very black and white way of thinking. And so it's a really opening way to suddenly feel like, now there's no Satan. Now I can think about things that I've never thought of before. It's really powerful, I think.
And where does that belief come from? He didn't just lick that off the floor. I think there's a Satan. Can you talk about why so many people, and in a lot of religions, like you said, but especially in Mormonism, why do they have this overwhelming fear about Satan, coming in to get them?
Well, there's a couple things that I might point to. I think I'd mentioned these things in the emails to you, but there's two things that I point to as what makes Satan really powerful in Mormonism, and It's when you demonize the ex-members as satanic and trying to influence the church through things like the temple recommend interview. So for those of you unfamiliar with the Mormon temple rituals, you go to the temple and it's basically the highest pinnacle worship in Mormonism. So you have to go through the steps of actually being worthy before you go to the temple. And so you sit down with your leaders, they ask you some questions, make sure you're being honest with your paying money to the church and you're doing this and this and this. And one of the questions is, actually the question changed throughout time. This is the way I think it used to be worded. It's a little bit different, but it's basically the same, where if you sympathize with individuals or groups who are critical or oppose the church. So you're basically being interviewed by a leader who you believe represents Jesus Christ, saying, I just want to check with you to make sure that you're not, at all sympathizing or believing anything that's critical of the church is okay. And then when you go into the temple, you have these secret rituals. Mormons always would like to remind you that these aren't secret, they're sacred. But when you go in, they're very weird. And you have Satan himself represented in the temple in this video. So the lights go dim, you start to hear these deep voices, this deep voice sort of guide you along this ceremony. And then this video shows, and you have Satan in the Garden of Eden, trying to tempt Eve and different things. And then Satan turns to the camera and just starts looking directly at you. And he's like, and he says these words. Let me just read it to you here. Let's see if I can find them here in my message. So he looks directly at the camera and he says, let's see. No, maybe I didn't write it here. Okay. But he's basically like, if you do not keep these covenants in the temple, you'll be in my power, And it's like this sort of creepy moment where Satan's looking at you and telling you, if you don't follow what we're teaching you, then you're going to be in Satan's power. And that really, really hits people. Like, I'm talking when you meet an ex-Mormon, someone who's left the Mormon church, and you talk to them about Mormon temple rituals, they still have phobias about the temple. Like, literally, there are some Mormons who don't even want to talk about the temple. And you're like, you don't believe anymore. What's the big deal now? Like, tell me the secret handshakes. Show me some of the stuff. Like, they don't want to even talk about it. That's how powerful the fear is. When you leave the church, you still don't want to talk about it because you're afraid. It's weird.
Right. I think that touches on something really important, that it's not all just about what's in your conscious thought. And when you brainwash people and you pound this stuff about you're unworthy, the devil's going to get you, all the information out there is misguided, you have to go with the church stuff. When it's drilled into you year after year, even if you intellectually eventually get, wait, this doesn't hang together, I don't believe anymore, your brain has changed, and that's probably why people have all those feelings and emotions and fear or self-loathing or whatever comes bubbling up. They're not imagining it. It might not, intellectually they've gotten past it, but it's still down there in the brain. And one of the things we've talked about before is, when you indoctrinate children, and not just Mormonism, any religion, when you take a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, you don't wait for the age of reason at 18, you don't wait till they're 21, you get them young and you start working on their brain. And it seems like people in the Mormon religion are really hampered for the rest of their lives. And it's such a struggle. I saw in all your videos how hard these people are working to get past what's been done to them.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I see some of the stuff so differently now when you see these young children singing these songs about how they want to go on a mission, and it's like they're singing these songs at like age 5, and it's like they don't even know what they're talking about, but they're getting ready to spread this message already, and getting ready to sing they're singing songs to get them ready to go to these secret temple rituals that they have no idea how creepy and how cult-like they are.
Yeah. Some of the other things that your brother talked about that I wanted to get to are the patriarchal blessing. And I'm sorry, I guess you can also talk about your other brother, that committed suicide. your family's hopes and beliefs that some friend offered, I have a patriarchal blessing to help raise the dead. And to you, it wasn't a joke. Like, what did that do to your family? And then, the disappointment after it didn't turn out to work.
Yeah, well, I was serving as a Mormon missionary, and my brother ended up committing suicide. And like you saw in that video, my family had this sort of moment of like, well, a family friend came, said, we can actually bring him back to life, because I feel like this is the moment when, my patriarchal blessing is going to come true, that I can raise the dead. And like, it was like the whole family kind of banded together, and we're like, yeah, we're going to have faith, we're going to fast and pray that this miracle happens, because it just seemed, it made sense. Even though it seemed like maybe we were grasping at straws, we still had that faith where this is possible, miracles are possible. And, so we did our best to have faith, and really just, like, I was part of the fast, even though I was away on my mission. And later on, it turned out that I found that my brother had committed suicide almost as a direct result of the way that the Mormon church had treated him. And it kind of shocked me. This was after I had left the church that I found this information out, but it really affected me, because, this is my brother. He basically was in love with this girl, and the church told him that he was not worthy and that she should leave him. Like, her leaders, were, because he didn't believe, my younger brother who committed suicide didn't believe, and she did. So she wanted a temple marriage and everything, and her leaders told him just to leave him, and basically this devastated him, and he ended up committing suicide. And it was very obvious, and going back into his email account and seeing some of the messages that they had sent back and forth, how this had affected him. Like, he was saying things like, everything that I am is becoming a hate for the church, for being the wall that separates us, stuff like that, where it's just like, you see how this was affecting him. It was incredible. And I don't know, maybe now this is a good time to show your videos that talk about another lady who...
Right, I was going to say, this isn't a unique experience that your brother had, and I think we'll get to that a little bit later just to space them out, but we will get to that one. But right, this isn't that he's the oddball thing, that he just got really unlucky and the church turned against him because some idiosyncratic reason, some random priest didn't like him. This is the church's kind of, how it operates. If somebody strays at all from what they want to tell them, they're the problem, and they need to follow the church. They don't do what's best for their life. And again, it's very heartbreaking. Your videos are really moving, and I think it's going to touch a lot of people that aren't Mormons and aren't believers, and it takes it out of the realm of some, intellectual arguments for why to be against religion, and shows how these are people that are so devoted, being crushed by it. And your brother talked about you, that he thought you were Nephi, maybe you can say who that is, and that you always made the right decisions and you left the church. Why would you leave the church? So maybe you can tell us a little about Nephi and that history, and why, I think it's obvious why you left now, but.
Well, I'd like to be able to take that position, but he was actually talking about our older brother, who's the Nephi.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Can you give just a little bit of that history because I didn't know until I read a little bit about it.
Okay, yeah. So he had left the church, and his reasons for questioning were incredible, because it really dove at the heart of the Mormon method of discovering truth. Because the Mormon missionaries will knock on your door, hand you a book, and say, read this book, feel of the truths in it, ponder them, pray about it, have faith that have faith in Christ that he will answer your prayers when you pray to God, and ask if it's true. Just ask directly to the source. Don't take our word for it. It's sort of sounds very humble, and for those who believe in God, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can ask God. Like, I have a relationship with God. I can go ask God. I'll just ask him. And so what happened was, my oldest brother, who was this sort of Nephi figure to myself as well, like, I looked up to my brother as well. Both of my brothers, actually. That's why it was so easy for me to listen to them when they both started questioning, because I believed these brothers of mine were like, I knew the sincerity of their hearts. I knew where they're coming from and their deep testimonies of what I agreed with as the truth. And but my oldest brother's problem was that he had read another book claiming to be testifying of Christ and about the Americas, which is what the Book of Mormon does. It's this ancient record, right? Well, someone else decided, oh, I'm going to write something like that. so my brother gets his hands on this, and he reads it, and it has the same promise, where it's like, read this, pray about it, ask if it's true. So he kneels down and prays, and he has this experience that is powerful, that was confirming, just like the Book of Mormon. And afterwards, he found out this guy was a fraud that wrote this book. It's called the Mentina Archives. If anyone wants to look into it, look up the Mentina Archives. That's Mentinah, Mentina Archives. And they're online. You can read them in PDF form. But my brother read this stuff and had this powerful experience. And then he started to wonder, well, if this wasn't true, but I had this confirming feeling, what does that say about the Book of Mormon? And when I prayed about that, and so we started to have this question that was at the heart of Mormonism, where missionaries are knocking on your door saying, this is how you know, here you go, here's the Book of Mormon, find out. And, so my brother, Chris, who's also my older brother, so my two older brothers, they start to get in this conversation because my brother Chris wants to save my brother Dwayne. Like, they're both, like, one has basically had these doubts and eventually leaves, and then my brother Chris is like still a true believer. He's like, I need to help my brother, And I'll give a little shout out because he actually has started a video series dedicated to showing his complete deconversion experience. And so far there's about 7 videos out. It's called it's called Ask Reality, the YouTube channel. So if you go youtube.com/askreality, that's just one word, Ask Reality.
Okay, and we'll post that up on our Facebook page afterward if you want. If you give that to us afterward or send an email, we'll make sure that gets on our site so people can get to it.
Okay, yeah, a lot of people are impressed with it, and he has a few more videos that are going to be pretty explosive, in my opinion, that are coming out soon. I think they're going to be great. And they have a lot of parallels with just religion in general, right? But yeah, so they have these sort of talks, and then basically my brother starts to have doubts, my second brother, and he comes to me and shares with me, and I was afraid to talk to my oldest brother this whole time. So this sort of psychology going on in my own mind. I'm aware of this. I'm aware of my own fears to simply talk to my oldest brother because I was afraid I'd lose what I call my testimony, my precious testimony. And so when my other brother...
Can you tell us what's the consequence? If you lose your testimony, what does that mean for the rest of your life and your afterlife? Because most people, I wasn't aware of it until I read a little bit.
Yeah, well, you frame your testimony and your belief in the gospel as affecting generations of your children's children's children. If they're born in the covenant of the Mormon religion, it's this important gift you're giving to your children. It's like the most important truth you could give them. So when you leave, it's both a reward and a punishment sort of style of thinking, because you are rewarded if you stay in the church through generations of your posterity being in the truth, but you're also having this thing dangling over your head being like, if you leave, you're also affecting thousands or millions, depending on how many generations you want to go forward in time to think about these fears. It's like you're affecting a ton of people by your own choice. So it's all...
I thought that was a really important point for just the coercive value of that, to say, look, if you have your doubts, that's fine, but if you go through with this, you're going to damn every generation that comes after you, you've ruined them. So maybe you should just quietly live with your doubts. And that's another thing I saw in a lot of the reading was, if you have doubts, which if you read about Mormonism, you're going to have a lot of doubts, it's okay as long as you keep it quiet and don't say it to anybody. And that seemed just a very pervasive, throughout all the reading. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it to your brother. And you had sent me some stuff too about don't go near anybody that can contaminate you or contaminate your thoughts, something to that effect.
Yeah. You kind of view it like that, like it's contaminating. Now, I will mention, there is a spectrum of belief in Mormonism, depending on where you live. If you're in Utah, you might have a lot more hardcore believers and group influence around you. So it's sort of different dynamics depending on the family you're born in and the extreme to the extreme ways you want to actually adhere to Mormonism, you know. So some people live Mormonism in a way that's just kind of like, there's a term even for it. You call them Jack Mormons. It's like they believe, they go, they don't really care. But in reality, there's a spectrum from the very bottom of like complete non-believer all the way to the extreme believer. And my big focus, or what I would call dangers to someone's psychology, you know, the unethical influence or coercive persuasion, is on the upper half of the spectrum. Like once you start getting to a certain area where you're saying, these men that are speaking, the apostles and prophets, these are truly men speaking from God, directly for God. Like you start to have some really crazy things where the prophet stands up and says, you're not allowed to have 2 earrings. And you hear stories at the pulpit all the time of like, and when I heard that, I took my 1 extra pair of earrings out that moment. And it's like everyone praises this person as like, yeah, you are the believer. And it's like, this is the kind of activity or response to the prophets that's raised up as the example. And that's where you start to have this, this spectrum of believers that are hardcore, that are really, making every decision in their life based on what other people say they should be doing.
Right, I think it seemed like there's so much, and this is true for a lot of religions, but especially with Mormonism, there's so much groupthink that goes on and so much intimidation for anybody. Again, they don't want you to seek truth. And it's drilled into you that if you spot anybody seeking truth, you need to out them. That was another thing that I saw in the history of Mormonism. They had I guess as Brigham Young was taking over after Joseph Smith was killed, that there was like an Inquisition, a Reformation, where the Mormon hierarchy really got lots of members to spy on each other, basically. And you can imagine the terror if you're living in this this group, that your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, your best friend, if you even ask them a question, they might out you and ruin the future generations. There's so much, for the family values kind of talk about religion. This is so divisive for families. I think it's important to remember, I guess, that when those Mormons come knocking at your door, as much as they are trying to keep proselytizing this stuff, and that might be annoying, they're really the victims in a sense, because they got this from when they were kids and had it pounded into them. And it's, you have to have that kind of empathy that we always talk about. Religious leaders that do stuff are one thing, and then all the bulk of people that are trapped in it are suffering themselves. So I think we're going to go to a break just for a couple minutes and come back and talk a little bit more and show some of those other video clips you had.
All right.
At NASA right now, scientists and engineers are working every day to help humans learn how to better care for our home so that we never have to leave. NASA has a fleet of satellites around the planet that keeps track of climate change and studies how humans are affecting the planet. NASA has a ton of geniuses, and all of them are working for a future that has a healthy Earth in it. Like when NASA helped find the hole in our ozone layer so we could fix it before the problem got out of control, NASA is doing its part. We have to do ours. This is our home. To learn more about how NASA is keeping an eye on Earth, visit www.nasa.gov/Earth.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue, but the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntly and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom, and I was cleaning the bathroom one day, and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So I just moved in with his family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born, and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Okay, we're back with D. William Johnson, the founder of ex-mormon.com. We're going to get to the other videos you sent in just a couple of minutes. One thing I wanted you to address maybe is Mormonism sprang up in the Second Great Awakening, 1820s to 1840s. There was a lot of religious fervor going on. There were a lot of people with what we might consider outlandish religious thoughts. Can you tell us a little bit about Joseph Smith, who he was? There's a lot of history that people should know as to why a lot of people think there's a fraudulent basis to him.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not a amazing historian by any means, but the amount of information that you can find online today, and specifically the change from a believer's mentality to, I'm going to look at this critically and see where these sources are from. I'm going to see if there's bias from this angle or this angle. As soon as you start to see some of the evidence and some of the journals that show Joseph Smith in a certain light, things start to break down, at least for me personally. It started to just crumble. The idea that Joseph Smith was an amazing prophet of God and there was no other way of looking at it, it just didn't fit anymore. And that's the narrative that you're given all through growing up Mormonism, is that Joseph Smith was an uneducated farm boy. How could he possibly have written such a complex thing as this, a holy book of Mormon, as the ancient writings of the American people? It's just amazing. He couldn't possibly do that. He started a church. He founded a town, and he was like this military leader, and it just goes on and on. He learned languages like Hebrew, and just, he was just this amazing man. But at the same time, it's like, even already you can kind of hear what I'm saying is like, well, wait, you're saying he's uneducated, so that seems to be propping up the idea that how could he have made the Book of Mormon? But on the other hand, he's a genius. So he can't be, a kind of dumb kid who just writes the Book of Mormon and has no intelligence, and at the same time is a genius that starts to do all these amazing things. You can't have it both ways. But so Joseph Smith, the story that you're given growing up, he sees God at the age of 14 because he wants to know which church to join. So he brings it directly to God. So this is interesting because you learn this story growing up, and you knock on doors as a missionary and tell everyone this story that Joseph Smith asked God when he was 14, and you can ask God too. That's kind of how it goes, right? But when you learn that the first beginnings of the church had no real focus on Joseph Smith and the first vision, as Mormons call it, the first vision of 1820, when Joseph Smith was 14 years old in the Sacred Grove in Palmyra, New York. You know all this stuff, right? You're taught this over and over. It's so special, it's so beautiful. But when you start to realize that the early church didn't focus on this the way we focus on it now, it brings into question, well, why? Why didn't the Mormon church in the 1830s talk about Joseph Smith in the Sacred Grove, seeing God the Father and Jesus Christ, Like there's a real problem when you start to see that this seems to have evolved into something more concrete as time went on. The Mormon Church started to preach, oh, and Joseph Smith saw God the Father and Jesus Christ, and all these things. So the whole story starts to be interesting once you see both sides, but you're only given one side in the Mormon Church, and then you're told, that there's anti-Mormons out there. This is a word that's always talked about in the hallways of Mormonism. Whenever there's sort of criticism of the church, you're told there's these anti-Mormons out to get the church, and they're inspired by Satan and the devil. So you have this sort of phobia of information that any anti-Mormon might give you. So
right, and so there's, so like you say, it wasn't until over a decade later that he declares, "Oh, I had these visions back then." A great thing again, I encourage people to read David Fitzgerald's book. That if you start to hear, wait, there's multiple different versions that are very contradictory of these visions that supposedly happened a decade ago, your intellectual mind starts to say, wait, they can't all, they're mutually exclusive. It doesn't hang together. And then the church says, well, that's Satan giving you that misinformation as opposed to historians presenting it to you. That Joseph Smith was, what he used his magic stones to help people dig for gold and find gold, and he got convicted as a huckster. And the Mormon Church, right, went for years denying that it ever happened. We have a couple of images, if you show us images up there, where they said, no, this never happened, he wasn't convicted, and then decades later, you can look at the court record that you were nice enough to send me, you can show the next one too, where it shows, yeah, Joseph Smith, the glass looker, was doing this. And then after he was trying to defraud people and doing his magic stones you can get rid of that picture, to show where the gold was, he stumbled on, oh, let's create a religion, and all the stuff. You can look at the King James Bible, like there's so much plagiarism in the Book of Mormon. He took huge chunks from other books and other thinkers of the time. I think we don't have that much time left. There's tons to learn about that, but we'd like to get to your videos, and so why don't we just roll the next set of videos that you put together and then talk about those.
I've always admired my parents. Their love for me and their love for their beliefs always impressed me, and I wanted to be like them. When I came home from that mission, I snagged myself the perfect Mormon boy, and he was just what my family wanted for me. He was a worthy priesthood holder and had served a mission, and so we got married in the temple. Well, 2 years into our perfect Mormon marriage, he started researching the history of the church. He found a lot of facts that we hadn't been taught when we were young, and he couldn't believe anymore. I went to my bishop, and I spoke with a stake president, and my parents did the same. They counseled me more or less to leave him, and so I did. And looking back, this church that had told me that family was first had ripped mine to pieces.
It destroys you. It destroys you from the inside out. I kind of internalized all the lessons that they teach you about, if something's not working out, that it's a problem with you, because God is perfect, and His authority and His Spirit, just kind of extends through the church. So they're like, this is, the only way you're going to get into heaven is if you're married and sealed in the temple to a woman. It's like you're a member of the church, and the church hates homosexuality, and so you hate homosexuality. But you realize at the same time that you're gay, and so you hate yourself. They don't understand how hurtful and how damaging and poisonous it is to a person to hear from these people that that you love and that you trust suddenly get up there in front of a microphone and say things like that it's an abomination, and that it's evil in the sight of God, and that it's satanic. And to learn and to be taught that homosexuality is something to be afraid of or something to hate, all that really does is just, it gives license for these people to be afraid of people like me. I had my moment that I always wanted, where I wake up one day and everything is different. Only it was completely the opposite. I woke up one day and I realized, no, I'm never going to change. And it's not that I'm never going to change because I'm always going to be wrong. I'm never going to change because there was nothing wrong with me to begin with. It was really just kind of a realization that I could love myself for who I am. I'm gay, I'm 100 other things, but I'm gay, and that's all right. I'm happy that I don't have to fake who I am for anyone anymore. My name is Braden Yamamoto. I'm proud of who I am, I'm happy, I'm gay, and I am an ex-Mormon.
Now, I apologize. You lose a little bit of just the artistry because I had to chop those down, but I think hopefully the emotion still carries through there. What kind of reaction have you gotten from people, the ones making the videos, and then other people seeing the videos?
Yeah, well, a lot of people who I film, they come to me because they want their story out there. Like they want people to they want to help people because they feel like, they struggled and they want to share their struggle with others so that, those who go through the same thing can have hope and sort of strength and confidence in going forward in their lives. And a lot of people feel the same way who don't participate when they watch these videos. When I was doing them, like at the end of that video, I said it was a weekly video series, right? I don't know if I'm getting a little bit, but a lot of people message me and tell me how these were videos they're looking forward to. Couldn't wait for the next video because they're putting through. I'm like having these things and
Okay, I think we're having a little bit of problem with the audio there. They're going to see if they can fix that. Are you able to hear me okay still?
Yeah, I'm fine hearing you. Is it just echoing or is it just cutting out?
It was kind of breaking up. I don't know if it's a Skype problem, but I can hear you right now. You give me a thumbs up if we can hear him okay in there. Okay, we're good again. I'm sorry. You keep going. I'm not sure if we'll be able to show the video, but you keep going. We can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Yeah, but basically just people will message me and say that they get a lot of hope from this kind of thing because of the messages they've received their whole life. Leaving the church. I'll give you a little list actually, just for curiosity's sake here. I won't mention all of them, but there's a lesson here about leaving the church. They call it apostasy, right? You have words associated like excommunication or disfellowshipment when you're sinning and not obeying the church. But when you leave and you're an apostate, there's a whole lesson. There's lots of lessons about sort of the evils of Satan and about leaving in general. But this one in particular has all these words associated with apostates. And I'll just read a couple to you. Satan, disobedient, proud, greedy, evil, haughty, scheming, darkness, hell, careless, betray, neglectful, fallen, error, persecutors, covenant breakers. The list goes on. That's like half the list. But if you can imagine having one lesson where you're associating all of these things towards people who leave, and then you yourself leave, how might you look at yourself? Like you might have this sort of like, man, am I like that? And then all your family and friends sort of like begin to shun you. Like you have some people who will outright just stop talking to you. Some people who are like, oh, I'm gonna save you. So maybe they'll work towards, they'll make you a project into bringing you back into the church. And some people are just so confused as to how to react that they don't even talk to you. Just, they're not trying to shun you, but they're just confused as to how they should feel about you because it's, you've been taught these things about those who leave. So you have this weird disconnect. So leaving, and you have a lot of issues to go through personally where you feel like you have to get through that fear of yourself being like that. And so having a support online, which there's lots of great forums online now for ex-Mormons to be able to have a community. But these videos just you get to sort of personally connect with someone who's gone through a similar struggle. And so I try to do a variety of different problems that people go through, plus a variety of success that people have where, like the video you showed of Eva with, where she leaves her husband and then she reunites with her husband in the end.
Right, as soon as the church came out of it, you had some very positive messages that these people who did escape the church, however difficult it was, eventually once they're just people again, they can find love, they can find joy, they find happiness, and they're so stunned because it sounds like they've been taught for years that if you wander from the church, you're going to be miserable. Not only are you going to ruin all your children's future, but you're going to be miserable. There's no happiness in the world. And again, it's very hard for somebody from the outside. I never would have known that people feel that way, but after watching your videos, the catharsis that they kind of go through and the emotional release just kind of the joy that they find once they escape it. I like how you talked about, when you sent me that word list of these are how we're going to brand people, it made me think of Newt Gingrich and his messaging where, okay, instead of, you take a nasty word and you want to stick like death panels. So instead of talking about end-of-life issues and, my wife does palliative care and how to help people through this terrible time, Obama is out to murder people with death panels, and you do that with everything, and you coerce people and you trick them into, you just shift the way of thinking. George Orwell, knew that language was really important, and thought crimes and doublespeak, it really works, and it's like we apply that nowadays. You also were fairly. You didn't brag on yourself there. These are some of the other things that people say after seeing your videos. Powerful. I'm crying right now. This is amazing. Thank you so much. Every time I feel down on myself, I think, perhaps this is punishment for leaving the church. Perhaps I'm headed into the outer darkness. But everything you have said on the videos is so true. Here's another one. I literally cannot describe to you the gift I'm an ex-mormon has been to my husband and I over the last few months. And another, we were physically ill for months. The layers of new realizations peeled away our old understanding. It's been devastating in so many ways, but your videos have truly been a huge part of the healing process. I can't thank you enough. And it goes on, and you've reached so many people that, I'm glad you can tell us about if there's some other outlets, but I had the same reaction when I watched it, that I don't usually get that moved by videos, but somehow you did a great job.
Well, thanks. Yeah, even for myself, like, it was just healing making them. Like, I was just, every time I made one, I was just, I felt so good about, just it's interesting when I go to interview people. Like, a lot of times they're worried, like, well, what do I say? How do we do this? And even when I do corporate videos and stuff like that, like, I have a sort of format where I'll have a list of questions and kind of try to bring out things. But when I go and interview an ex-Mormon and they're worried, I pretty much tell them, don't worry. You have a story in there, and it just comes out. Like, every time I film, it's almost like, there's been a few times where it's been a little bit of an issue, but really, like, very high percentage of people that I film, they just dump all this, like, passionate, amazing stories, and it just comes out so easily because they want this to be told, and it's, yeah.
I imagine they've had nobody to speak to. They've been so terrified to let this out for so long because that's what's drilled into them, and then you come along and give them an opportunity, and it's, it's really an amazing series. I hope, are you planning to do more of those, or what's the state of that right now?
Yeah, I want to do more. I have like 15. Yeah, sorry if I'm breaking up there.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but I do want to put out more. I just haven't gotten there yet, but I will be continuing the series, and I don't know if I'll have it weekly like I did before, because that just stressed me out, as you probably feel.
Yeah, I imagine there's a ton of time that goes into it, but I just want to give that feedback that, those are amazing. One other comment that I got that I noted for myself, I want to talk about, more than simply a response to the LDS Church's media campaign of I Am a Mormon, these videos were heartfelt expressions of people who finally were able to find peace. What was the I Am a Mormon campaign? Because I didn't realize that's what it was there some very purposeful things set out by the Mormons to help with the indoctrination?
Yeah, the Mormon Church spent millions on campaign. Mormon.org, if you go there. Now I'm free advertising for that, But check it out. It's just interesting to see how they have a set of videos where they basically say, we're normal people, and then at the end it's like, this is my name and I'm a Mormon. So this idea, this meme, was basically pretty big to talk about in the ex-Mormon forums and communities. And they're like, look at the money that these people are spending to look normal. Like, it's just sort of weird. It's not normal.
Right.
And so they have these campaigns, and people started talking like, you know what, we should tell our stories like that. They start to sort of have these conversations. I'm just reading these, and I'm thinking, like, I had just recently left the Mormon Church myself, and I'm reading these thinking, like, I've been wanting to do a documentary or something for, ever since I left, because I feel like I want to do something about this, So just seeing these people say, well, here's what I would say if I did an I'm an ex-Mormon video. And I read it, and I'm like, that is some powerful stuff. Like, I want to film these, So I had this idea in my head from basically the community. They were just talking about it, and I went up to my friend and said, "Hey, you want to film this right now?" And we filmed it and edited it the same night, and then sent it online, and it went kind of viral. Like he's
right. I understand you got 2 million-ish views so far in that series. That was
so far. Yeah, the entire series has gotten over 2 million views.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, you did a great job. Another one a video that I didn't show. I don't know if you remember the names, particularly the Anderson family, where it's a husband that did some reading and then he couldn't believe anymore, and he says how he went to his wife, ready to share this information, open up, and he was hoping it would go so differently, and her reaction again was that she was devastated. And then she spoke to her church advisor, which I guess is the first step that you go through when you see this, and they advised her again, leave your husband. And I don't know if you remember the story enough. Their marriage did stay together, but I thought this was one of the most touching stories of how he gradually tried to share the information when she was ready, let her read it for herself, not push it on her. But just watching these two struggle, they loved each other, they wanted their marriage to survive, they realized the church was in the middle, and still what a fight it was to get past that.
Yeah, this couple received from their neighbors a message telling them to move away. It was insane. These guys were in Utah. They're actually going to be at the ex-mormon conference this October, and there's a panel of there's going to be those two, Eric and Shauna Lee. Then there's going to be another Nick Godfrey. He's going to be speaking on the panel, and then myself going to talk a little bit about the video series at the ex-mormon conference. So it's going to be interesting.
Okay. I don't know if I lost you again for a second there. Another thing I wanted to talk about was with polygamy, which once again, like many things, was buried and denied for a very long time by the Mormon higher ups. Some of the negative consequences you can imagine for the child brides. These aren't old maids that are lucky to get somebody that will still take them and take care of them. These are the patriarchs might get lots of young child brides and send away the young boys because they don't want that competition. So that's one set of harm. You had a much more personal story that you related to me about. You're back with Joseph Smith, I think. Maybe can you tell us? Do you know what story I'm talking about? How?
Yeah. This is probably, I don't know. You could say it's one of my favorite stories, but it's just one of these things that those who have left the church, it's just such an emotional story that it really hits people. Like when you start to really realize what happened in the 1800s with Joseph Smith, you're like, how did I miss this, right? So basically what happened was this guy, Henry Jacobs, he joins the church, and then Joseph Smith is like, hey, I'm gonna marry your wife. And he's like in love with this woman, and he gets sent off on a mission, and he's like so sick of what just happened that his wife got married by the prophet that he doesn't even, he had to be carried onto the boat to be sent on his mission or something like that. And so anyway, Joseph Smith dies. Happy days, he gets his wife back, right? 1844, Joseph Smith is martyred because he basically, long story short, Joseph Smith kept trying to marry everyone's wives until one of the highest leaders in the church leaves the church because Joseph tries to marry his wife. So he's like, you know what, there's a line somewhere, and the guy just kind of lost it, and he's like, the church is still true, but Joseph Smith's a fallen prophet because he keeps on trying to marry everyone's wives. So he prints the Nauvoo Expositor in this printing press. Joseph Smith goes crazy because he's kind of the town mayor or whatever. He gets together his people to destroy the printing press. Well, now you've got this freedom of the press issue, and everyone goes crazy, and this mob comes and kills Joseph Smith. And that's a short story. I'm sure Mormons will have their perspective and say, wait, it wasn't like that, but I'm pretty sure it was. So basically, Joseph Smith dies. Henry Jacobs gets back together with his wife Zena. Well, then Brigham Young gets to be the prophet after a period of time where people are like, who's the next prophet? It's kind of a little bit interesting. Go into history. There's a lot to read about this whole stuff. But so Henry Jacobs back with his wife. His wife's pregnant. Brigham Young says, okay, let me just find the section here. Okay, so Brigham Young, I'll just read this. This is from MormonThink.com, I believe. So Brigham Young takes a liking to his wife and takes her a second time. So Brigham announces they're like going on this pioneer trip. He says, it was time for men who were walking in other men's shoes to step out of them. Brother Jacobs, the woman you claim for a wife does not belong to you. She is a spiritual wife of Brother Joseph, sealed up to him, and I am his proxy. And she, in this behalf, with her children, are my property. You can go where you please and get another, but be sure to get one of your own kindred spirit. Anyway, so suddenly now his wife's taken a second time, the woman he loves. He gets sent on another mission, you know, it's just like crazy, this poor guy. Well, we have his love letters to Zena. Like here he is, still believing in the church, and he sends this love letter. September 2nd, 1852, he wrote, "Oh, how happy I should be if I only could see you and the little children, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. I am unhappy. There is no peace for poor me. My pleasure is you. My comfort has vanished. Oh, Zena, will I ever get you again? Answer the question, please." He's writing her, right? And she's not responding. She's off. One of the many wives of the prophet Brigham Young, who had over like 50 wives. And he writes again in an undated.
And we just got about a minute and a half left, so you might have to give us a short.
Okay, we'll give a quick. Zena, my mind never will change from worlds without ends. No, never. The same affection is there and never can be moved. I do not murmur nor complain of the handlings of God. No, verily. No, but I feel alone and no one to speak to call my own. I feel like a lamb without a mother. I do not blame any person or persons. No, may the Lord our Father bless Brigham Young and all pertains unto him forever. Tell him for me I have no feelings against him nor have ever had. All is right according to the law of the celestial kingdom of our God. And then it sounds like he's actually calling Joseph Smith God, which is a little weird. But anyway, so the emotion of that letter really puts into perspective what's going on. These men were stealing people's wives. Like, it's just pretty sick when you start to really understand and feel that emotion.
Yeah, there's again, the polygamy is wrong for so many ways, and again, I think that just personalizes. Again, you see somebody who's devastated by that. A lot of things we didn't get to talk about: institutional racism, how black men. Forget about the women. Black men couldn't get the priesthood, couldn't get anywhere until a revelation. A little while ago, God decided that they could. I think we're just about out of time. I'd love to talk to you more, keep up an email correspondence. Thank you for the great work you did, and everybody, we'll see you back here next week on Road Treason, Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Will, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good, we're done. I'm sorry, I just did the best I could to step. I was expecting a second host, so I was just trying to make sure we kept the flow going. A lot of stuff we didn't cover, but.
Yeah, I went off on tangents that were,
Well, y'all did a great job, and I think there's room to, maybe if we do like a round table with some